You can have all the money, success, and status in the world and still feel empty. Why? Because leadership that only invests in profits eventually runs out of purpose. And that's why we teach the 5 Capitals tool, a simple framework that helps you build a legacy, not just a paycheck. I'm Eric Pfeiffer, and in this episode, I am joined by Don Neldon, and together we're unpacking how the best leaders measure what matters most and invest accordingly.
Yes. This is such a interesting conundrum that frankly we see play out on huge scales, right? You look at celebrities and you're like, why do their lives continue to spin out when they have, from a financial perspective, everything seemingly that they could want? Or these huge leaders of huge organizations or pastors of big churches, right? They seemingly, from a cultural perspective, have reached the pinnacle, you
Yeah.
know? But somehow their life spins out, and I think it's because they don't understand this tool, and they have spent all of their time investing in success and finances, and they have depleted these other areas that we're gonna look at, or they've underinvested in them. So, I'm curious, why do you think that it is so normalized in our culture to underinvest in all of the areas except for financial? We're so hyper focused on those financial investments. Um, why is that?
Yeah. And it's interesting because even in the examples that you just gave, it wasn't just money that they had. Like they know everybody, it seems like they're part of the who's who club.
Yes.
A lot of these actors have these amazing physiques and they work so hard to engineer their bodies to
Yeah,
perfection,
true.
right? They seem to have a lot of knowledge about the world and access, right, to all the best information.
Mhm.
And it is an interesting thing to see that they've accumulated all of what the world wants to call wealth,
Mhm.
only to find that they've oftentimes built their lives on a faulty foundation. So I think in response to your question about why do we see leaders fall into this trap so often? Why do we fall into this trap, quite frankly,
Yeah.
in our own lives? Because we're always struggling with
Mhm.
this as well. I think oftentimes, especially within business and family, we tend to value what we measure we measure what we value until we value what we measure.
Mhm.
Right. So typically in the business, we measure productivity and profits.
Yep.
Right. We have quarterly goals and products and services that we want to sell or to produce. And then we want to know, did we sell them and how much money did we make? And because that is one of the primary measurements, that's because that's what we value
Right.
in a business. And I think that should be a part of the measurements in any business, right? Because without the money and income, then you can have a business. However, if we're not careful, what happens is because that's the primary thing we measure, that then becomes the primary thing we value within an organization. And oftentimes, organizations who bring us in, it's not because they're not already successful in their production or their revenue. It's because they've not paid attention to the other dynamics going on in the workplace
Mhm.
that make a business actually work well, or within a household.
Yeah.
When I'm speaking to leaders about their own, personal lives and they're sharing about the struggles, it's not because they're not financially, successful and stable.
Mhm.
It's because they've not paid attention to the other important dynamics going on in their household. They've not measured those dynamics. They've not learned to value those dynamics.
Yeah.
And so whether it's in business or in our personal lives, I think it's important for us to remember we measure what we value until we only value what we measure.
That's Yeah, that's spot on. And it's why this tool is one of those that, again, flips our understanding of leadership on its head a little bit.
Yeah,
So, let's dig in. Let's unpack this for our listeners today. Will you just start teaching us through the 5 capitals tool?
absolutely.
Hmm.
I want to give credit where credit's due. Just a reminder to our listeners that all of the tools that we're playing with, we've adapted, we've innovated, we've borrowed from people much smarter than us who've gone before us. And in our book coming out We reference all of those original works because we want to make sure we give credit where credit's due. This tool was born out of a former organization that I was a part of, and it was our attempt to give language and a framework for people to make sense of the fact that in our culture, we tend to primarily pay attention to one form of capital, which is financial capital, right? And we'll come back and define that and talk more about that, because what we need to understand is financial capital is valuable. To operate in the world that we live in, you have to have financial capital.
That's right.
The problem is that we are short-sighting ourselves because we're not paying attention to the other four capitals that we are every single day growing, trading, investing, whether we feel rich in one of these capitals or whether we feel deficient or depleted in one of these five capitals. There are actually five capitals that every single day we as human beings in every area of our life are working with. So if we're only thinking about financial capital, we're selling ourselves short. So the five capitals tool basically gives us a simple list of the five capitals that we are, every one of us, trading, growing, investing every single day. So let me first define these five, list them and define these five capitals in terms of, we want to talk through the language of currency because we're going to use the financial metaphor. I think it'll help us understand the value of all five of these capitals. So the first capital we're going to unpack is vision capital, right? Which is right at the top of our list. And again, we'll come back and explain that more. Vision capital is defined through the currency of significance and purpose, right? And so when you ask people, help me understand what makes you significant? Where do you derive or draw your sense of significance from? What is your purpose? Right? Most of us are operating from a mindset where we just kind of feel like one more human being on planet Earth. We're born, we die, and maybe we do, or maybe we don't make much of a difference. But the reality is every single human being has significant influence. Like think of throwing a stone in a pond and the ripple effect. The ripples go out, for a long way. And I think sometimes we short ourselves from understanding that our lives matter. I don't care how old we are, what role we are, where we came from, what we inherited, what we didn't inherit, whatever our station of life is, whatever our age, whatever our, place in the world, every single one of us as human beings has significant value, importance, because we all have significant influence. Now, we have to choose what we want that influence to be, whether we want to operate from a position of significance or we get to choose insignificance. But also, what is our purpose? Why are we on the earth? What are we fighting for? Are we fighting for something bigger than ourselves? Are we a part of something bigger than ourselves? So traditionally, people will derive significance and purpose from different forms of religion, spirituality, family tradition, heritage, from a sense of nationality, a lot of different ways that people can draw significance and purpose. But it's really important that we ask the hard question. Where do I derive my sense of significance from? What is that? And what is my purpose? There's a reason why Rick Warren, a well-known pastor out of Orange County, wrote a book, years ago that sold, I don't know how many crazy millions of copies. Yeah, it was just crazy. Why? It was called The Purpose-Driven Life. It didn't matter what your background or your faith affiliation was. People bought that book in droves because deep within human beings, there is a desire to want to connect with or reconnect with our sense of significance and purpose. Why am I here? And what am I fighting for? So that's vision capital, the currency of significant purpose, significance, and purpose. Say that fast 5 times.
Yes.
It's purpose. The second capital on the list is relational capital. This is measured in friends and family. And not just how many people, do you have in your contact list or on your speed dial. We're talking about the quality of relationships of our life through the lens of friends and family. And the way that I talk about this is the deposits that we are making in others such that we can make a withdrawal.
Yeah.
Right. You and I have been both married not to each other, but to other partners for many, let's get that straight on the call.
That's right.
For many years. And we know the experience of when when we're not investing in the other party, that it makes it difficult to make a withdrawal. We know that when we're not investing into coworkers, into the relationships, that it becomes more difficult to make a withdrawal. So, for example, we worked with an incredible company, this executive team, that when we jumped into working with them, man, they were siloed, fractured, they were withholding information, they were all territorial. They did not want to help each other out. Why? Because they had spent years probably not investing appropriately into the relational capital or the relationships with one another, such that they could no longer make withdrawals from each other. Trust broke down and communication broke down. So relational capital is basically measured through friends and family, the quality of those relationships, such that we can make withdrawals because of the deposits that we've been making. Third capital on the list is physical capital, and we measure this through the currency of time and energy. Now, let me explain this. Everybody has 24 hours and 7 days in a week.
We do.
Well, I'll leverage that time the same, right? And we'll come back to this conversation around what's our investment strategy. Everyone has 24 hours and 7 days. Energy is about the energy that we have to bring to our days and to any situation. And so we talk about, when we're staying up late, when we're abusing, alcohol, when we're, burning the candle at both ends, when we're constantly on the road and not sleeping well, whatever the case is, we have to pay attention to what is the level of energy that we're bringing into life, right? Because what we're really talking about through the lens of the 5 capitals is we're talking about a life investment strategy, not just a financial investment strategy. So we got to think about that bank account as well, our physical capital. Now, let's talk about the next one on the list, intellectual capital. Intellectual capital is measured through the currency of knowledge, information that we've accumulated and acquired through classic education, books, podcasts, YouTube videos, whatever. Know-how, knowledge and know-how. So it's not just about the information we've accumulated, but the skills that we've developed. And that is a currency. And again, a currency is amazing because it has value and it's something that we can leverage, barter, trade with to the different experiences of our life. For example, right now, I am leveraging my intellectual capital of this tool and what I've learned about these 5 bank accounts in our lives for our listeners. The 5th and final capital on the list is financial capital. It does belong on the list. Money is not evil. How we use money can be evil, or how we view money can be unhelpful. And financial capital is very simple. Most of us have spent a lot of years thinking about it and playing with it. It's measured through the currency of cash and assets. So money in a bank account, or the assets, things that we own or have ownership in that we could, if we wanted, liquidate back into cash. Boats, cars, homes, bicycles, snowboards, and the list goes on and on. Any possession that we have some kind of ownership of, it becomes an asset for us that is a currency that we can leverage. For example, I spent some time in Palm Springs last week, and one of my clients offered the use of their home. So they were leveraging an asset, which is a form of financial capital, to serve me in why? Because we have a relationship. And so they were investing in what? Relational. All kinds of wonderful examples. But first and foremost, we need to understand these are the 5 bank accounts that we are playing with every single day in every interaction. As a matter of fact, in an earlier call today, I was introducing this tool to a client, and they came up with a great example. They said, so you're saying that like these are involved in something as simple as getting my wife a cup of coffee in the morning and bringing it to her in bed. I said, yes, you tell me, how are these 5 capitals at work? He said, well, first of all, I have a really clear vision for the significance and purpose of my marriage. And therefore, I want to invest in that marriage. And so getting a cup of coffee for her in the morning communicates love and care and a sense of significance to her. I said, great. He said, relational capital. Well, I want to invest in that relationship because I do want to be able to make a withdrawal. We did. At some point in that marriage, right? Whether it's asking for her help or wanting to be intimate or wanting to partner in some other activity. And then physical capital, he said, it took me time and energy to go to the kitchen and to actually retrieve the cup of coffee. I said, great, you're on the right track. Intellectual capital, he said, well, at some point I had to learn how to make the coffee, even if it's as simple as making it a Keurig. Like, you had to learn how to use the Keurig machine, right? And then last but not least, the financial capital. At some point, they had to buy the machine and the coffee grounds or the pods or whatever it is they use to make coffee. I know my pour over friends right now are going, talk about pour overs. That's the best. We had to spend money at some point to acquire these tools so that we could leverage them.
That's right.
So in a very simple example of something we do in life, we are constantly leveraging, investing, or growing in these different bank accounts. And so, but here's the thing, because what we're talking about is a life strategy. So like I said earlier, when we think of wealth, we tend to think of wealth through a very narrow perspective of how much money or cash and assets do you. And I don't think that's completely wrong. I just think we're missing 4/5 of the conversation. These other four capitals deeply matter. Why? Because nobody on their deathbed is overly concerned about their bank accounts. What are they concerned about? The relationships of their life, the legacy that they're leaving to their kids, their spouse, their extended family, to their business, whatever it is, right? I tell people all the time, if you're really, really sick, then again, you can't do anything with that money except maybe go find a doctor. So
Yeah.
we're constantly trading on these. And what we want to make sure is that we develop a very clear ROI of what a wealthy life looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And a wealthy life is where we are growing and investing all five of these capitals such that we are getting the return in the different areas of life that we desire. So the first order of business is to recognize that we need to develop a clear ROI in our marriages, in our families, in our businesses, in our friendships, in every area of in our physical health, in what we want to accumulate in terms of our knowledge and know-how. We've got to develop a clear ROI. And then we can reverse engineer and ask the question, okay, how do I now work with these different bank accounts to invest toward the ROI that I'm seeking? It's no different than if we just break it back down into financial capital. If you want to retire, what do? You get a financial advisor and they start helping you think through what are you making and how can you grow these accounts, financial accounts, and what are you investing long-term so that you are prepared for retirement or for your kids' college fund or for to buy that vacation home or to go on a vacation or, to get that new car, to make repairs, to do whatever.
Yeah.
And I think that what's happened is in our culture, we have primarily thought of this through the lens of finances. And I think we need to start broadening that to think through all five of these bank accounts. What is the clear ROI we want? What's our investment strategy? How do we grow and leverage these accounts or these currencies so that we are getting the results we want? Because more often than not in life, and people hate hearing me say this, but it's absolutely true. More often than not, we are getting out of life in the long run what we are investing into it. And so we need a clear investment strategy through the lens of these five capitals. So before I jump into a few other things that our listeners need to hear, Dawn, I want to just pause here and just hear what's kind of popping for you.
Yeah. I think as you were describing those, something that came to mind was that many of these all of these capitals, let's say, we don't pay attention to them until we are maybe bankrupt, until it becomes right. Our physical capital, we take for granted that we can get out of bed and go about our day until something happens and we can't do it. And we realize we wasted all this time. We kept making withdrawals unaware that we weren't leveraging, we weren't investing properly to be able to make those withdrawals. Same thing with relational capital. I've seen so many people, the epidemic of loneliness in our culture is because people come to a major point in their life where they need to make a relational withdrawal, but they have not invested in relationships. So when they look around and they need help, there's nobody there to help them.
Oh, God.
And just like we develop a wise strategy with trusted people to help us build financial wealth, we need to develop that same strategy for all of these other areas of our life. Because like we've been saying, you can be rich and not have a life that feels rich.
That's
There,
right.
those are two different things. And when you look at so many people in our culture, that's the problem that they're struggling with. How have I achieved all of this and my life still doesn't feel rich?
That's right. Yeah. And so we have the privilege of, and I'm not going to name any names, we have the privilege of working with the owners of a professional sports organization here in the States. Okay. And what blew me away is when this owner, the majority owner, he invited me into a meeting, and this family is worth billions of dollars, which that's all public information. But he invited me and he said, "Hey, I want to ask for your help," which is really interesting. So think of it like we go to a financial advisor to help us to figure out what we want to do with our finances so we get what we want. And he interestingly said, "I've got these amazing sons who I want to make sure, because they're going to be stewarding our family assets, into the future. I want to make sure that they know how to operate really well, that they have a really clear sense of where they're going, what they're trying to accomplish, how to partner together, how to leverage their time, energy, and resource to get what they're running after. They need to, where do they need to grow in terms of what they understand, their knowledge base, in these different, the different assets that the family owns, and in how to leverage the finances." And without him even understanding or knowing this tool, he
Mhm.
was essentially saying, "Would you be a wealth advisor for our family?
Yeah.
Would you help us consider just beyond the finance? Because we had plenty of money. It's fallen out of our ears.
Yeah.
But would you help us consider these other areas that we know are important, but we're not quite sure how to make the right deposits or investments, and how to leverage these different currencies to ensure a greater legacy
Yeah.
than just being, worth billions of dollars." And so I've been working with this family. It's amazing when I got to this tool and I was sharing this with the family, they were mind blown. They were just like, "Oh my gosh, this is what we've been trying to figure out, because we know these other bank accounts matter. We know these other forms of capital really matter. We've just not been able to simplify it and understand how they work together and how they influence and impact one another, and areas where they were making the wrong investments or they were sacrificing, one capital for another, and that wasn't helpful." And, so anyways, for our listeners, I just want to encourage us, no matter what our current personal value may be when it comes to finances, this is a much bigger conversation than just money. This is a conversation about how do we envision the life that we want to fight for, and then how do we invest strategically toward that. All right, so let me jump into the next thing. We've defined each of the 5 capitals. We've talked about the currencies with respect to each of those bank accounts. Now, what I want us to do is talk about bank or checking our bank statements, right? So oftentimes we'll go on and check, do we have enough money to go out to dinner or to go on this vacation? Do we have cash in the bank? And what I tell people is we need to, on a regular basis, I would say monthly is a great rhythm, or every 3 months, once a quarter, is we need to do an audit on these 5 bank accounts, and to simply ask this question on a scale of 1 to 10, how do I feel about this bank account? Do I feel like, man, that bank account is full, 9 or 10, or it's middle of the road and we're not sure what to think about that, or it's depleted? Because what we need to understand is what currencies we have at our disposal to leverage to grow the areas of our life that we want.
Mhm.
And so I think we need to audit or check our bank accounts in each of these 5 areas on a regular basis with some frequency. That's the practice of self-awareness that then clues us into what accounts need more attention. Do we need to grow those capitals? Maybe we feel good about them right now, or maybe we feel like, wow, we have a surplus, and so we need to invest that capital into an area of our life. That's what it comes to. That's the second thing, checking our bank accounts, or auditing our bank accounts, or I should call them capital accounts. The next thing on our list is we want to talk about our valuation, or our capital alignment. How do we value each of these capitals versus the other? So let me just start with this. All 5 capitals are valuable, but they are not equally valuable. You can have all the money in the world, but if you don't know what to do with it, intellectual capital, then you're going to lose it. People who've won the lottery statistically are bankrupt within a few years. Professional athletes who made loads and loads of money during their career are bankrupt, within 3 to 5 years. You can have all the money, but if you don't have the intellectual capital to know what to do with that money, and you will lose that money. It won't
Mhm.
do any good for you. If you have all the money in the world and all the degrees and all tons of skills, but you are laid up sick with a disease or in bed because you have constant migraines or because you're not taking care of your body, then guess what? Without that physical capital, you won't be able to do much with all of your knowledge, know-how, and money. You can have all the money, the intellectual capital, the physical capital, but if you do not have relational capital and you don't have healthy relationships, people you can trust, that you can lean on, that partner with you in life, then guess what? What they say generally is you are the poorest and the saddest of all people. And I can tell you, Don, I have worked with so many very, very rich, financially rich people who are living lives of desperate loneliness, despair, and depression because they sacrificed the relationships of their life on the altar of more money or acquire more education. And last but not least, you can have all these four capitals, but if you do not have a clear vision for your life, in other words, significance and purpose, then what happens is we become like the plane without instrumentation, the ship at night at sea without a compass. We become directionless, scattered, and we will begin to invest or trade or basically handle our capitals in ways that do not have a clear direction, purpose. And so we will be left with not the legacy that we want, which is really harsh, but we see it all the time. So real quick, before I jump on to the last application, anything popping for you there?
No, I'm just excited to get to this next part where we talk about the alignment.
We're just talking about the alignment. Now we're talking about investment strategy.
You're right. Sorry about
Oh,
that.
you know what? Let me say one more thing about alignment that I didn't get to. You're right. I didn't finish alignment. So when we listed these five capitals out at the beginning of this episode, I put them in a particular order. I started with vision at the top, then relational, then physical, then intellectual, then financial.
Right.
And when we ask people, the prevailing culture of the United States, if you asked people generally to prioritize this list from top to bottom, which capitals are more valuable than the next, what we generally hear is people will put financial at the top, then they would put intellectual, and then they would put physical, then they would put relational, and then they would put vision capital at the very, very bottom. The problem with that is that when we have these capitals misaligned, we're not prioritizing or valuing them appropriately in relation to one another, we start making the wrong investments. We start trading less valuable capitals we start trading more valuable capitals for less valuable capital. We start trading relationships for money. We start trading our sense of significance and purpose to fit in, to be a part of the cool crowd, however we want to frame it. See this list in our minds, or you can go to the show notes and we have a link so that you can look at the list firsthand. If we do not have these aligned properly, we will make bad investments that will leave us bankrupt as we go through life.
That's right. And that's the piece that I wanted to get to because it is such a mind flip for people to realize that, and I know we're going to get to investment strategy, but when we are inverting that list, like you just said, we are sacrificing. When we have the list in the right order, we are investing.
Ooh, I like that.
A very different way of looking at how we prioritize, order, make decisions. Things become much more clear and everything starts to work together in a much more symbiotic way than the normal way that we do it, which just feels like we're depleting, we're making withdrawals, we're sacrificing.
Yes, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So on to our last point of application, our investment strategy, right? And of course, in our book coming out, that is actually, now we have an official title, Upgrade Your Leadership, simple leadership tools to help you overcome drama and build trust and thrive under pressure. Is going to be coming out very, very soon. It covers this tool and all the rest of the tools in our toolkit, what we call our leadership operating system. And you're going to have more information than you can handle. We also have all this stuff in online courses. You can go deeper. But for today, for this session, let's talk about our investment strategy. There are two things we need to think about when we think about our investment strategy. Number one, it is always in our best interest to trade the less valuable capitals for the more valuable capitals.
Yes.
Right? So think about it this way. If the list is from top to bottom, vision financial at the bottom, the way we first listed it out. And then I want people to remember this. To trade up is always right. To trade up is always right. And the reason is because we want to accumulate the more valuable capitals, because those more valuable capitals can, in fact, be traded for the less valuable capitals. Let me give one simple example. So I invest in my clients, not just intellectual capital, but I invest a lot of relational capital. I get to know my clients, we become friends, we spend a lot of time together processing deep and meaningful things across every area of life. So we develop relationships. Guess what happens? And very often, these clients who are much richer than I am in financial capital have a bunch of toys. And so guess what they want to do? They want to share their toys with me. They want to take me out on their yachts. They want to take me on their planes. They want to make sure that I, am taken care of. They want to lend me, like I said earlier, their vacation homes. They want to connect me with other people. They want to, invite me into their social circles. Why? Because we built this kind of trust, and their way of wanting to return the favor of what I've invested in them is they want to share with me the things that they've been able to accumulate. And so right now, what we're seeing is in that story that I'm actually not in any manipulative way, but I'm actually in that moment trading the relational capital for financial capital that I couldn't afford. I can't afford a yacht or a lot of the toys that these folks, but I get to trade the relational capital, which is more valuable, for the financial capital, right? I get to learn from my clients. That's intellectual capital. Things that I would never learn if I wasn't working with them and they didn't trust me. They share with me their business strategies, ideas. They share with me their innovations. They're, kind of giving me a sneak peek behind the veiled curtain of what they would never share with anybody else. I get access to the intellectual capital that they've accumulated. Why? Because of that relational capital. So again, I'm going to say it. It's always in our best interest to invest the lesser capitals for the more valuable capitals.
Yes.
So why do our clients invest money and to have us coach them? It's not because they're looking for more money. Usually that might be a byproduct. What they're looking for is they're looking for growth in their intellectual capital, knowledge and know-how about leadership and relational dynamics and how to build teams and all that stuff. They're looking for relational capital because leadership is a lonely endeavor and they want partnership in it. And they're always looking to grow their vision capital. They always want to develop a clear sense of who they are, what they're fighting for, and why they're fighting for it. So that's the first investment strategy. We invest the lesser capitals to grow the more valuable capitals. The second investment strategy, to grow any one of these bank accounts, we have to invest all 5. So let me give one example. If we want to grow our physical capital, for example, we would say, I need to lose weight. I need to get more fit. I need to get healthier so that I have more energy.
Right.
First of all, we need a very clear vision for that, because if you don't have a very clear vision for growing that physical capital, guess what? You'll quit after about a week or 2, right? You'll need relational capital. You're going to have to leverage relationships and to get help to find the right gym and the right trainer. And you're going to have to make a relational investment. You're also going to have to invest time and energy, which is physical capital, the very thing you're trying to grow. You're going to have to invest intellectual capital. You have to do some research. You're going to have to go out and learn about what it is that you're wanting to increase in terms of your health and fitness. And you're going to have to spend some money. That's financial capital. Or like the example that my client this morning gave, which is getting his wife a cup of coffee in the morning. He wants to grow his relational capital with his wife. And so he had to leverage all 5, which we already illustrated, to grow that form of capital in his marriage. So again, the investment strategy is if you're going to grow one bank account or any one of these capitals, you're going to have to invest all 5. And here's what I tell people. This is the last thing I want to say. The sooner we wake up, listener, listen to this. If you heard nothing else I've said, listen to this. The sooner we wake up to the fact that every interaction, every engagement in our life from the moment we wake up all the way through our sleeping patterns is an investment. We are investing one of these 5 capitals or multiple of these 5 capitals. The problem is we're not clear about the ROI we want. We don't have a vision for what a wealthy life looks like. And so we are very unintentional about how we invest these 5 capitals as we go through our days. the more we pay attention to these 5 capitals, the more we reflect on these, the more we realize that all of life is really just an investment strategy. And either we have one and we're learning and developing one and we're growing in it, or we are just running around aimlessly, directionlessly, just throwing stuff at the wall, hoping something sticks. In long term, one of those will lead to something great and one of them likely doesn't.
That is so true. I love that. And so I'm curious, when, let's say, our listeners are waking up to this reality, like, oh crap, I do not have an investment strategy for my life. What is the first step that you would tell them to start a better investment strategy, or to get Vision Capital at the top and order everything correctly? What's one thing that they can do?
Yeah. So I'm going to give them a real simple process that they can use at the micro and macro level,
Great.
right? We can think about any area of our life, or we can consider our life in general.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to start in the more micro, and then they can apply it to the macro. What we do is we think of an area of our life: marriage, family, relationships, physical health, our finances, our things that we're trying to learn, our sense of significance and purpose, our vision. But we just think through one of those 5 bank accounts and ask the question, where am I getting what I want out of life? And let's celebrate that. But also let's reflect on, where am I not getting what I want out of life? And let me reflect on that. And then let me articulate in a journal, on a piece of paper, on your computer. Let me articulate, what is the ROI I want? What do I want from my marriage? And what do I want from my relationship with my kids? What do I want from my physical health? What do I want from my sense of significance and purposes? What do I want in any of these areas? What do I want? What is the ROI I want? We have to set a clear vision for what it is that we want. And then we can reverse engineer and ask the question, what would be my investment strategy? Remember, because to grow in any one of these capitals, we have to invest all 5.
Mm-hmm.
And then what we do is we can go from there, reverse engineer again, and say, okay, well, how are these bank accounts doing? What's in each account? Do I feel like I've got a lot, or do I have a little? And then what we can do from there is say, okay, well, based on what I have to work with, I can start working an investment strategy toward that ROI. But I also have to consider, do I need to grow any of these accounts so that I have more to invest? Right? And then that usually begins to clue us into, we start to then become aware of the investment strategies that we're currently employing, usually subconsciously.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can ask the question, do I need to recalibrate any of these so that it better fits the direction in which I'm trying to move?
I love that. I think that's a great challenge for our listeners this week, is to just take stock of your accounts and consider your investment strategy, kind of bring it from that subconscious level to the conscious, intentional level. So, any other thoughts on that?
Nope. I think we've given plenty for our listeners in this
So
section.
much in this episode, I know. So next week, we are closing out this series with our final tool, the radical minimum standard, because every culture drifts, even the best culture. If we are not holding a standard, it drifts unless we anchor it. And the radical minimum standard is how we teach our leaders to anchor their culture, their workplace, their own performance. So if today's episode helped you rethink what really matters in your life and leadership, we would love if you send it to somebody that could also benefit from this, if a specific leader came to mind. And don't forget, in our show notes, we have a free course for you, the 5 shifts to become the leader that you wish you had. All of the information, as well as our diagrams for each tool, are available in the show notes. And we thank you for being here with us today, because the best leaders, we want you to remember this, don't just build careers, they build lives that really matter.